I think we are ready, sir.
Yes, yes, we are. All right, team, ready?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Civic Innovation is Global Conversation series. We're very, very excited to have you with us. We're going to wait a few moments for everyone to join, and then I'll be very happy to welcome you all formally and hand over to our speakers for the day. As we wait, team, I just want to quickly remind you to...
Je voulais vous rappeler.
The interpretation, yes, we're working on it.
Ouais, nous travaillons sur ça. Je crois que l'interprète est déjà là.
The French interpretation will be joining shortly, but we won't start without him, so don't worry.
L'interprète est là. L'interprète francophone est là. I'm here already. Sorry, Safia, the link didn't get me in. My apologies.
Oh.
Lovely. Thank you. We have French interpretation. I'm going to give one moment for our colleague to get set up.
Just double checking. Amanda, are you able to assign Yannick, or do you need me to?
I think we're good to go with the French interpretation.
I'm just setting it up right now, sir.
Perfect. Thank you.
All good to go, Seth.
All righty. Thank you all. We sincerely apologize for the late start. I hope everyone is well, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Safia Khan. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'm the Innovation and Quality Management Officer at Civicus. Today, I'm here to just quickly introduce the Civic Innovation is series to all of you. We're very, very excited about this. Civic Innovation series is a global series of conversations that aims to build on the community that Civicus has. For those of you that are not familiar with Civicus, Civicus is a global alliance of civil society organizations and participants working together to strengthen citizen action and our civic freedoms throughout the world. At present, Civicus has over 17,000 members in 175 countries. This series of conversations, we hope, will build on this community, but with a specific the specific focus on innovation. Through this series, we hope to reach as many people as possible that are interested in collaborating around civic innovation. We want to understand how civic innovations and where they are being implemented, and we want to build upon Civicus's approach to civic space innovation. By civic space and civic freedoms, we mean, of course, our freedoms to assembly, association, and expression. And why this is important right now is that we're having this series of conversations against a backdrop where, civic freedoms are under unprecedented crisis. According to the Civicus Monitors People Power Under Attack 2025 report, civic space is deteriorating in a record number of countries, where now most countries are rated as obstructed, repressed, or closed. Governments are increasingly using restrictive laws, surveillance, and force to silence dissent, while activists, journalists, and community leaders face intensified crackdowns. So while this is happening in the world, what is certain for us is that we cannot go by business as usual. We have to adapt. We have to become agile in how we respond to these crises, and the status quo cannot be maintained. Hence the term innovation. For us, it's not just technology. It's indigenous knowledge. It's collaborating together. It's partnering. And so through this series of conversations, we want to know what civic innovation means to our speakers and to the communities that participate through the series of webinars. We will be together for about an hour and 15 minutes for this conversation, but I hand you over to our facilitator for the day, Ashley Green Thompson. Ashley, over to you.
Good afternoon. It's actually just gone midday here. My name is Ashley Green Thompson. I'm assuming it's afternoon for most people, unless you're joining from the eastern side of the world or the west. I never know these things. So you're more than welcome. I'm convinced that Safia asked me to facilitate this question to try and shut me up and not let me talk too much. So technically, I'm also a panelist, so I will be contributing to the conversation. But I'm particularly interested in my colleagues who I met in a couple of recent meetings in Thailand that Civic has convened. And I'm going to ask them to kick us off. We've got Stephen Jenga from Kenya and Sita Supomo from Indonesia. So the way we're going to do this, let me just outline how we're going to do this. It's really a conversation, right? We've got a couple of questions. I've got a few questions that I will throw into the room. Steve and Sita and myself will have a first take at it, a first dig, and talk about our work, because I think that's the reason we are here on the panel. And then, towards the end of the session, invite those who have questions to also engage in the conversation as well. All right, which I will ask Safia and the team from Civicus to manage. Safia did very well. She didn't speak too fast. So we've got interpretation. So I'm going to ask Steve and Sita not to try and get through an entire thesis when they speak in 2 minutes, but rather to speak with measured cadence so that everyone can hear. Is that okay with everyone? Well, actually, there's no space for too much interaction, so you have to be okay with the way we're going to do it. Let's proceed, right? So I will have a chance to introduce a little bit more my organization, but I'm going to start with you, Steve. If you can tell us a little bit more about Mo Fund Africa. What do you do and how and why?
Thank you, Ashley. I will try to follow the instructions because you have not given us much room to not follow that. Stephen Jenga is my name. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. I am the founder of an organization called Mo Fund Africa. And our work is centered around advancing the work of community-embedded change makers who are building an impact to their communities through innovative business models. Some of them are registered as social enterprises, so it could be for-profits or non-profits that are focusing on healthcare, on education, on agriculture, and on energy. So far, we have activities and we are supporting organizations in Kenya, in South Africa, and in Nigeria. We have 137 organizations in our network that we support through capacity building and through grant making. And our work is facilitated by philanthropy. It means that we are funded primarily by the generosity of Africans, but we are also supported by corporates that believe in the mission that we work on. And I would like to share more about how we do this work and how we are able to turn the generosity of Africans, philanthropic capital, into catalytic capital that stimulates or that catalyzes the growth of community embedded change makers. What this word means for us, it means that we have a lot of micro level change makers in the communities who are running ordinary standard enterprises that are engaging so many people in the community. It could be reducing post-harvest losses for small-scale farmers, so they are off-taking and they are adding value, but their commercial activities are not to the scale for which lenders or investors could come in. We have people that are advocating for specific issues, could be gender inclusion, it could be refugee rehabilitation. And again, these activities are such a struggle just to get support, strategic partnerships, or funding that facilitates them to deliver their activities. So in a nutshell, that is what MoreFund does. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Steve, when I was preparing for the session, I saw on your website that you talk about building trust in local organizations. Do you want to perhaps just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, trust is the
It's one of your
commodity.
main headlines, right?
Yes, trust is the commodity that if you run an organization in the community, you realize that it's the one single commodity that is most difficult to acquire. And why this is the case is because it is trust that first allows the users or the target beneficiaries in the community to believe in your solution. And two is also the commodity that allows anyone to come in to what you do and offer support, either in terms of technical assistance or adding to your kitty and saying, I like what you do. I'm going to sign a $1,000 check just to support your mission because I believe in you. So what we try to do is to leverage on this trust by de-risking. De-risking means that we support the organizations in our network to have what you call the key items that anyone who wants to fund will want to look at. Do you have systems? Do you have processes? Do you have people that you account to? And how do you account to them? How do you utilize resources in your organization? This is what we mean by de-risking and therefore building trust.
Cool. Thanks very much. We're off to a good start. I know this guy, he can talk for very long, so I'm quite happy. Sorry, one last question to ask you, Steve.
Yes.
Do you only work in Kenya or do you support organizations and change makers throughout in other countries as well, or is it just Kenya?
Kenya and South Africa and Nigeria for the moment.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Thank you very much. Sita, same thing to you. I mean, you guys have been around for a while, right? And I've been practicing how to pronounce Indonesia untuk Kemanusiaan, which is Indonesia for Humanity. It's a fascinating organization. Please tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yes, I will tell very little because you give me only 5 minutes. You know what? No, but I'm going to use it, wisely. Okay, so Indonesia untuk Kemanusiaan, or IKA, we like to call it IKA for short, just like other Indonesian organization and institutions, it's always abbreviated. IKA is a resource organization based in Jakarta, Indonesia, and that's where I live as well. For nearly 3 decades, we have worked at the intersectionality of solidarity, social justice, and community resilience. But we do not define ourselves primarily as a grant maker, especially these days. It used to be in the past. We define ourselves as almost like a movement resourcing organizations. We don't implement things. It's our partners that implement activities and projects, if you may. But we work with them, accompanying them through the process. We mobilize resources from public solidarity, philanthropic organizations, partners, and community themselves. We call it in Indonesia as a galang daya. It's resource mobilization. And then we the second is we redistribute those resources through what we call participatory process or bagi daya partisipatif in Indonesian. And then most importantly, we work to build collective self-resilience and autonomy. And this becomes the center of our work for the past few years, what we call bangun keswadayaan. What makes IKA distinct is this. We are intentionally not trying to become big. We are a national organization, but we don't want to be a gigantic, if you may, an organization. Because we believe, in the sector that often equates scales with success, we often choose a different path. IKA likes to reflect, and that's what we are doing at the moment, actually. And we remain to be lean so that we can stay flexible, inclusive, and courageous. We do a lot of currently prototyping for our community-led practices. We do not aspire to institutionalize as big organizations, so to speak. We aspire to move movement, vitality. And we don't only focus on strengthening organizations. We accompany them to become resilient as we need to be resilient as well. But what we aim is to strengthen the ecosystem. Recently, we introduced what we call, tentatively, we name it solidarity economy based on relation, not transaction. So words to ponder, though. When I was invited to this, it says civic innovation is ... So for us, civic innovation is root work. Just like behind me, there are some what you call it, plants and trees and roots, extensive roots, if you may. So, but let me begin this with uncomfortable. Ashley specifically asked me to be provocative, so I provoke you, Ashley. So what if the reason civil society feels fragile today is not only because government are repressing us, which is what happened today in Indonesia as well, but because we built our movement on a shallow roots. So it's fragile. We built strong programs, we built sophisticated reporting system, we built beautiful proposals. But did we build deep resource sovereignty? That is the question. So in 2024, in IKA, we decided to take that question and test it. We planted a seed, what we call akar daya. It's behind me as well. The akar daya means roots of resources. In English, it's translated as transformative resourcing, actually. And this is supported by Civicus through the local leadership lab program. So today I would like to suggest civic innovation is not always about new tools. Sometimes it's about growing deeper roots, I mean. So that's the thing, the aspect that we are focusing on in IKA these days. It's all about akar daya or transformative resourcing. That's it. Back to you, Ashley.
Man, you're picking up so many things that I want to just jump straight into, because it's there's a lot of what you said that resonates very closely with me and the work that we do. So what we'll do, because I want us to come back to really interesting concepts of transformative resourcing, the fragility of civil society. How do you build the trust in small, localized change makers so that they're able to amplify their impact as we go? So I'm impressed, Rita. You took exactly 5 minutes to say those things. This is going to be an easy one to facilitate. So let me give myself my 5 minutes. So thank you. We'll come back to it, and I'm going to ask you questions based on that. And you must feel free to throw in your questions as well, okay? So there's not just me throwing questions in. Actu bumbano, much like untuk kamasian is a localized word. It's a Nguni word for solidarity. And we're not as old as IKA. but we exist I think there's a lot of parallels that exist between us. So I'm briefly going to just say that the the reason for our existence is that we want to be a resource to local community struggles. Those people, those organizations who are engaged in resistance against their dehumanization, we want to be in solidarity with them in a way that's not just transactional or performative. And we do that, and I'll mention three main focus areas. The first is that we have something called a solidarity support facility. And it's really small money. If you are stuck in the middle of a rural area or in an urban center where there's no resources, you can apply for funding for up to $2,000 to do whatever it is you think is important in your struggle in that area. We don't determine what the priorities are. And I've just this morning tested our new online platform. It's even simpler than before. So it'll be a lot easier for ordinary activists to access. And in not setting what the priorities are and rather listening to what communities are saying, we basically are foregrounding the wisdom of those who actually live their oppression and saying, we will listen to you and not just pay lip service to that. The second way in which we try to be a resource is that we convene those activists into spaces. We call them hubs, solidarity hubs. And in the solidarity hub, we come in there to talk to each other, to reflect on our own work. Civil society, NGOs, we often have we walk around with the belief that we are noble and righteous people because we are doing work for nonprofit. But very often we are part of the problem. We unwittingly maintain power relations that keep communities dependent because we come there with our wisdom and our learning and our PhDs and this and that. And so we convene these hubs where we ask people to reflect critically on themselves and their own work and their own complicity. It's been a phenomenal experience over the last 8 years, how activists have come out of that space feeling like it's the first time they've been heard. And then the third area, and I'll stop there, is we try to amplify those voices that are not heard. So we do that in a number of ways. We might have publications. We might support organizations or activists to participate in platforms where they can articulate the reality from which they come, so that it's not us who are in the urban centers, who are middle class very often, who earn a salary from our NGOs. It's not us that are determining the agenda, but it's people who are actually living the struggle on a daily basis. That's Actu Bumbano, but I would encourage you to visit the website to find out more. And I'll make a plug, subscribe to our newsletter. It's the best newsletter in the world. Cool. So shall we proceed? So thank you very much. I hope that gives you an overview of the people who are on the platform, and hopefully it prompts you to think and find ways in which we can engage. Can I proceed to the first question I want to ask and maybe pick up on some of the provocations that you were raising, Sita? I think that all three of us work, I'm hoping, using innovative approaches to social justice animation. So my question that I had shared is, how do you see change happening in these societies in which we work? And I want you to talk primarily from your approach, right? Because, there's a number of people who have theories of change that usually involves might and money and armies and all of the regime change. We all know that word at the moment, right? But all three of our organizations are involved in very localized solidarity work. How do you see change happening in these difficult situations we find ourselves in? Whoever speaks first can go first.
Steve, would you like to take first?
I can start. My mind was going in circles as I was listening to Ashley, and I'm very keen on hearing how you are balancing these dualities, because you brought something that just before I can respond to your question around being careful not to reinforce stereotypes of the power dynamics that exist between organizations that potentially are grant making and the people in the community who are advocating for change and are running initiatives. It's a tricky situation that we have found ourselves in when we can clearly see gaps that are hindering the progress that they would make just because of how they are set up and how they are designing their theories of change or the levers of change. What do they want to pull so that it can effect the desired change in the community or in the system that they're attempting to make a change to? So you can be thinking of how I'm very keen on learning how that works. But from our experience, what we can consider innovative in our approach is we realized that the power dynamics that we very much fight also influence how the entire system operates. Sometimes very straightforward and directly, but also sometimes in very subtle ways that we find ourselves not able to control or not even able to voice out or acknowledge. The way that we raise our funding is first from people who believe in the mission that our organization is running. And that gives us the first source of power, that we are not, we have a fighting position to say, we like the engagement that we are being provided for, but because we have resources from people who understand our mission and who talk to their peers and their networks, and they resource our organization, we are able to disburse this budget in a way that is central to our core DNA, and we are able to manage these resources and talk to the change makers in the in the countries that we are serving from a point of understanding. And what is also innovative about the approach that we take is in terms of documentation of impact. One of the things that is such a struggle is when you talk to any of the 137 organizations that we support and ask what their story is, they'll give you a pitch deck of this is what we do and this is a change that we are effecting in our community. We are advocating for inclusion, we are advocating for engagement, for education in the community. This is what we have seen as change. The struggle on documenting impact is such a big thing, and it also influences the extent to which we are able to raise funds from those that trust us or those that want to add to the kitty of More Fund Africa. So we have tried to be innovative here and use technology, asking questions, one question at a time, that doesn't come with a framework of numbers that are known in this impact system. It's just, what's your story? What do you want to effect change on? What does success look like? Without giving a framework, so that we give authenticity to the change maker to be able to tell from their perspective, this is exactly what they want to do. And that doesn't determine whether we fund them or not, but it just helps both us understand them better, but also them understanding better. And we have used these stories to be able to tailor capacity, because we also ask, if this is actually what you want to do, what do you think is the biggest hindrance? What is the biggest challenge for you to get there? Why is it that the people that you're working with are not understanding your message? Is it how you communicate to them? Is it how you do stakeholder engagement? What is the gap? So that when we are providing any technical assistance, which comes to the first question that I asked you based on your experience, tailoring that technical support that it is specific to exactly what you need to do to be able to amplify or to quantum leap your impact. That if you are advocating for a specific change, the way that you engage your stakeholders, the way that you plug into that community becomes seamless. So documenting, using technology, and at the same time, mobilizing resources from where the strings are attached to the mission that as an organization we have.
There's a lot there that we must come to. Sita, do you want to give a go?
Yeah, I think you're asking how do I see change happening in society in a difficult situation? For us, whether that's repression or political volatility or funding contraction, one thing for sure, change rarely begins with large interventions. At least that's what we learned from our lab with the Civicus. And usually it begins quietly, and it begins when community recognize what they already have. And this is an important part. In our experience in Indonesia, change happens when people reclaim their memory, communities activate relationships, local knowledge regains legitimacy, trust is built or rebuilt, collective imaginations reopens. And sometimes, and most of the time, change is not always explosive. It's very quiet. Just like roots, it's hidden, but it works, it moves in a way that it connects one to another. And that is why we call our approach Akardaya or root of resources or transformative resourcing, because before branches grow, roots deepen. Through Akardaya, we focus on, the mobilizing resources, redistributing, and resources also strengthening collective resilience. But importantly, we expand what resources mean. For ICA, as you can see in the back here, resources, at least for us, and it expands in the community. For us, at least, resources is not always about fun, but it's also knowledge, network, and volunteerism. And this is important to understand because it's also for community, what we've learned about it expand into culture, land, intergenerational solidarity and trust. And that enrich us, those conversation and those prototype that we accompany. So when communities recognize this as a legitimate source of power, something shifts. Autonomy begins to emerge, or at least the beginning of it. And then we do not push rapid outputs. So in other words, things are moving very, very slowly. And it's slower than we thought, of course, at the beginning. And then what we do allow, though, in the slow process is that we deepen reflection as infrastructure. It's very important to reflect almost in every move of progress. And trust we've learned as political capital. And then peer learning as strategy, because we learn from each other. Imagination also as a practice, because understanding of what we have and to address issues that we prioritize. We also need imagination to go beyond boundaries. But at the end, you start with what you have. And that's what root of resources means. And it's very important when you talk about sustainability. So in our organization nowadays, we put sustainability up front. So at the beginning, we think about, what is it in the community that you have, the resources that can move the needle to whatever direction that the community feels important to move. So change becomes less about intervention and it's more about activation. So how can we activate what we call, not all asset is resources, but resources in terms of capital that community understood that as akar daya, or the root of resources, is the resources that help them move forward to address issues that they believe is important to be addressed in the community. So that's our learning, at least for the past 2 years with Civicus Local Leadership Lab. That is so meaningful because it also not only we learn from the prototype that we have and the community have, but also it set us to the journey moving forward as we close down the first 30 years of our existence and moving to the next 30. And this is where the groundwork that needs to be done to strengthen the root of resources within the communities from one community to another as a movement, not only one community alone that is resilience. So that's that.
So both of you are talking about a very deliberate focus on those people who are actually in the community at the coalface, people who are actually at the forefront of resistance. I think Steve spoke about the power dynamics. He spoke about documenting the impact, not just even of the people that you support or fund, but impact of those people who, at a local level, are making waves, and connecting with those people to learn. And I think it's safe to say that these aren't the dramatic aha moments, the ruptures, the explosions. And maybe that's an interesting political economy question. We can talk about why the young people haven't been able to topple the power in Kenya or in Bangladesh or in some of the other parts of the world. Why it is that these ruptures, these moments, have flared brightly and excitedly and then have not been able to be sustained. Maybe there's something to be said for connecting at a local level. Cool. Can I look? I think that what you guys are talking about is brilliant because that's. I'm starting to think that we are a mini me of you guys who've been around for a lot longer than Active Bumbano. But a lot of what you say resonates with how we have seen how we see change happening. And the one thing that we're very clear about is that it has to be, we've got to do something different. I think two things. We've got to do a lot more than lip service about what happens at local community levels. And that's got to be the thing that informs the support work that we do as resource organizations. But I think also we need to find ways of holding power to account, right? South Africa is going through it's the year for local government elections. So there's a lot of, I'm worried about who's going to be the mayor of Johannesburg. It's supposed to be a world-class African city, but the water runs in the street and the potholes are big and there's water cuts and electricity cuts. It's a bit of a mess. And we've been struggling to find ways to hold power to account in this country. And what often happens is that the NGO class tries to take up or to seek power because believing that we would be better placed to deliver on what the people need. And that's a big mistake.
Yeah.
I think our job, I think change happens when those who hold power to account are stronger. Because power will inevitably go where power needs to meet its own agenda and meet its own needs. And so part of the democratic struggles that we have is about making sure that those who are on the outside are actually are actually stronger to demand that accountability.
Yeah, but what needs to happen, Ashley, because some of the lessons that we have learned, not just in the organizations that we have supported in our network, is that anytime that it seems like there is this invisible ceiling that you can lobby, you can advocate, you can agitate, but there is always a level that you get to that the power shifts. And this power doesn't shift in the dynamic that you hoped for. It shifts that you as an individual organization get to that level. And probably that is the reason why CETA and your organization, you have decided to grow only to a certain level so that you are able to effect the change that you need. But as soon as you get to that level, you realize that there are powers that you need to start answering to. There are conditions that you hit on a personal level that you, instead of you holding that power into account, the power starts holding you into account. And probably it also explains why, if you see the Gen Z movement that we have had in Kenya and the same in other countries, it gets to a point where it's emotional. Everyone is in agreement with the power, with the path and the noise that is being made, and no one denies that a change needs to happen. But as soon as that change needs to happen, the movement disintegrates because it didn't have structure. It didn't have a clear plan of this is exactly how the change needs to happen. And that, and most important, that aspect of that you just finished by saying, Ashley, there is no clear transition of who exactly is going to do what. And the NGOs that we have seen, or the people that we have seen leading the change, make an assumption that they can do it better than those that are there. And anytime that this attempt happens, we have seen those who have been successful taking lead very quickly get swallowed by the system.
Yeah, I think I resonate with what you count, Steve. And what we also found, our work revealed something very uncomfortable. Civil society does not only suffer from, shrinking civic space. For us, especially because we are on resourcing, shrinking civic space in terms of resourcing, obviously, with all of those, regulation and stuff. So it suffer, therefore, from structural dependency. And that's what at least from, if you're familiar with Indonesian history from 1998 to now, that's what happened, the structural dependency. We are excellent, a lot of organization at upward accountability, but we are less practiced at the sideway accountabilities, solidarity across movements. We are skilled at writing proposals, but are we skilled at cultivating the ecosystem? So it's always like we are good in scaling, organizations. Many organizations wants to be big, and they're getting big, but are they nurturing movements? One of our biggest realization is this. Many civil society structures resemble potted plants. Potted plants, yeah. It's separate, funded individually, competing for the light. But if we look at forests survive storms, not because each tree is strong alone and it stand alone, but they survive because of their roots that are intertwined underground, exchanging nutrients, sharing warnings, supporting weaker trees. Sometimes falling tree was not completely fall because underneath it was supported by other trees. So our direct challenge to the sector is, are we building forests? Or are we multiplying pots? Tree in the pots. Are we cultivating autonomy, grassroots autonomy? Or what? Or are we optimizing dependency? These are a lot of these questions, resonates, at least in ICA, because we, as I mentioned to you, we reflect all the time, and our learning from the Akar Daya process makes us actually slow down as an organization. And, for us, it's a big change, of course, that we need to survive internally in terms of making sure it communicated properly, making sure that there is ample space for people to feel comfortable despite of, the uncertainty of where the organization seemingly look. It's certain, but the way to get there, it's always full with prototyping the process. So bringing the whole team, even though we are small, it's not a small task, because we are not thinking of strengthening plans on the pots, but building the ecosystem, whether that's a small ecosystem in our organization or it's a bigger system within our network. So that's a question, a big questions for us actually in this fast-changing world and competing resources, if you may, one almost like competing hardly with the other and wants to be big in itself. I guess it's supposed to be okay, but at least at the end, you want to grow for what? It's for the movement, or you want to go alone? If you want to go alone, then it's fine. If you want to go big, in terms of movement, you have to go together. That's my.
But you see that's part of the problem, right? The development industry has shaped our practice and our thinking and reduced a lot of what we do to numbers. When we talk about impact, very often we've got traditional monitoring and evaluation systems that want to count the number of beneficiaries, or
Yes.
have we achieved policy change in the national government? And there's very little, there are very few tools that help us understand the impact of building those roots, that in that network of interconnectedness, that solidarity across community struggles.
Yeah.
And, the philanthropy sector talks about shift the movement all the time, shift the power.
Shift power.
But I don't know if that's enough, eh? I don't think that we are actually grappling with the difficult questions of how do you build solidarity that is rooted in people and in communities, that takes a long time to develop. It's not going to fit neatly into your funding cycles or into your log frame indicators. It's something that is about building relationships that happens over time, and usually it's iterative. It doesn't just happen in one fell moment. I don't know, maybe that's what the ruptures were missing, is that kind of rootedness.
Yeah, and aren't we supposed to question those, the terminology, the system that donors created? Because it's almost always, it's hard to be inclusive in that sense.
Yeah.
So we need to do things differently. We believe in shift the power, but we don't believe in shift the power in a big way, because it's almost often the challenge is just too great. And, with the civil society resources, small that is small as is now, with all of the kind of funding cuts and everything, we just need to be realistic, right? But, it's very important. Three things that we have in mind: shift from funding organization to cultivating ecosystems. Because ecosystem nothing is even, it's always uneven pacing. We have 6 partner organizations. One is very fast in understanding. The other one is very, very slow. It seems like they don't get it at all. But that's what community is all about. You cannot fast forward those processes. Yeah. So, and innovation is not only about new tools. It's probably about redesigning relationship. It's probably about going deep looking at the roots inside the roots and how the roots works in the community, listening more, observing more. And then the second is to define what counts as measurable change. We in ICA 10 years back realized how extractive the monitoring evaluation developed by donors. And we create the antithesis of it, which is pemaknaan. And we brought that around the world, introduced that. And one thing we've learned through our process with pemaknaan, that we need to trust. Trust is data. Yeah, trust is data. Leadership emergence is data. Shift in imagination, shift in paradigm is data. Collective courage is data. Tell me where you can find that in the monitoring, evaluation, measurement. It's none, because it's a lot of ticking the box and then it gets sent to the donors, and then the community never see the light of whatever decision or discussion that was made afterwards. So community will, they extract information from the community, but the community never sees it back, basically. And then if we measure only financial output, then we believe, through our experience, we miss the transformative change in the community. And therefore, we must measure what strengthens roots, not only what grows branches. And that's, for us, it's a learning process all the time. We see this, the methodology that we created based on subjectivity and consent and relational and care, basically. And the third that we've learned, which we also struggle at this point, is build autonomy before crisis. Global funding construction is not a future threat. It's there. It's here. I mean, so if we only react when donor withdraw, we'll remain fragile. We need to exchange notes on how we see possibilities. What is possible now? We need to imagine it, and don't wait for the next grand cycle. I'm saying this not to sideline. Donors funding is still good, but we need to be very critical about it, so that we can be accountable also with our funding stream to the community, because community will not go from level 1 to probably like level 6 overnight. There is no such a thing, and every community is unique. And the challenge is how donors can see that and adapt to it, rather than communities needs to adapt to the donors system, which is much more difficult, I think, because they don't have resources. The donors have resources, obviously. So that's my thought.
Steve, you look like you're itching to contribute something to that conversation. How is that? Are you guys looking at these questions? You talk about shifting the power. I think your model of funding is also quite unique.
Yes, there are two things here, because we pretty much look at the generosity of Africa as part of the resources. I mean, Sita explained quite in detail about looking at resources in different lenses. It's not just financial. There is also the amount of labor that goes into the development industry, which is never measured because it's not in the interest of any donors to measure to what extent does the community contribute to the impact that is normally measured in this complex log frame and indicator methodologies that we use. So the way that we look at this is leveraging the generosity of Africans. And I started by talking about trust. And this is one of the principles that we embed in the organizations that we take through our support program, that there are people in the community. Africa is the most generous continent in the world. And I think 2024, 2025, 72% of Africans have donated to charitable causes that they care about. You saw what happened in the Gen Z movement in Kenya in 2024, where resources were raised in matters of hours just because people believe so much in the cause that the Gen Zs are fighting. People are donating cars, people are donating water on the road, people are donating financial resources and just sending because they know that these resources are needed. So when it comes to the impact measurement framework and the framing of what are the tangible, measurable outcomes that are going to come out of the movement that the change makers are working towards, the framing is what determines the kind of resources and how these resources can be channeled to be agents of change to this organization, so to the change maker, so to say. So leveraging on crowdfunding is one of the things that we have seen working. And we have seen this working not just for ourselves, but for some of the organizations that we are supporting and helping them in defining these methodologies so that it can work for them at that individual level. Because there is authenticity in just telling the impact story and the vision that they have and saying that if you come and join us, we need this, we need this, we need this, because this is the route that we are taking to effect change. We have seen a community coming together because the crisis in that community is human-wildlife conflict. They come together and say, we have a problem. Okay, what's happening? We have a lot of wildlife coming to our farms and they are demolishing what we have planted. So what do we need to do? Let's come together. Let us engage the government on this issue. They engage the government, nothing happens. They come together, they say, okay, we need to protect ourselves. Let's dig a trench to make sure that the wildlife is not crossing to come and destroy our crops. But it's not enough. They realize that this is a continuous thing. You can't just go to government land and start digging trenches. They need to start engaging. So it becomes a whole process of discovering without ever thinking that there are donors that exist. In fact, one of the questions that triggered me was, but how do not donors just give money? Who gives money? It's this community that has no idea what a donor is. They have no idea how to write a proposal because writing a proposal is such a strange concept. They were asking, how do I write to someone who is seated somewhere in a country in the West or in the North, and they just send us money? What do they want back? You know?
It's a common sense question.
Yes, it's a common sense question. I just realized that in all my years in this industry, I never thought about it. But what do the donor actually want back? But this
Yeah.
community that has one problem, they come together, they decide that the young people in the community don't have money, but they have energy. So they dig the trenches. The parents and the others have other resources. They have money. So they come together,
Yeah.
they realize that this initiative, they don't have the time to go and dig the trenches because they are working in their farms. Some of them have jobs, some of them have businesses. They run them, but they bring money to this contribution. Others are working the farms, so they don't have money like the ones doing business, but they are bringing food to the young people who are digging the trenches. And those among them in the community who are educated, they are lobbying the government and they are told, okay, we need to do a memorandum of understanding between you as a community and us. Then they say, in which name are we going to do this memorandum of understanding? They say, we don't have a name, we don't have a registered organization. So now they are forced to become formal because they need to have a name so that they can have a memorandum of understanding that
Yeah.
says the government will allow them to go and plant fruit trees in the forest. Their young people can keep bees in the forest and harvest the honey. They just need to make sure that the forest services are informed in time. And so they create a mutually beneficial relationship. So in terms
Yeah.
of impact measurement for this community, they have a clear goal of what they want to do. They have a clear mission, and so much resources are gathered which no one has sat to just document. If someone would ask this from the way that the donor engagement works, what was your annual budget last year? If you ask this organization, what was their annual budget? They never counted the quantity of the food that was given to the young people who were digging trenches. They never counted the amount of time that was spent by the number of people who went to engage the government in all the meetings at the time quantum. They also never engaged they also never mentioned the outcomes that are coming from the sale of all the fruit trees that they have been able to do. So this is how innovative resourcing looks like.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So I can see Sita's getting ready to jump in. I'm conscious of time. I did warn you that both of these people are not shy to speak. So we're going to take one question. We're running out of time. There's a question that comes from Nigeria. I think we need to engage with it, right? And what I'm going to ask is both of you to engage with the question. And then I think it'll just leave us enough time for you to have, maybe you can have your parting shot. Maybe let's deal with the question and see how we handle that.
Yeah.
So it's in the group. You would have seen it. It's coming from Ayo Asaya from Gender Equality Club Nigeria, who's concerned about how you promote accountability without facing backlash and political crackdown, particularly when, despite having a legal framework for development and accountability, politicians and governments tend to sometimes disregard those things. So and I think she's talking they're talking very much from a grassroots perspective. How do you promote accountability without putting people in harm's way? Who wants to tackle that one first? It's not an easy question.
Yeah, it's not an easy questions to answer, but I think a word to ponder: accountability, according to whom? I think that needs to be established first. Usually, when we talk about government regulation, then in our organization we just follow the basic minimum. The rest is something that we need to create together with communities, what makes sense for them, and that's how we learn. The accountability sideways that I mentioned earlier, because as a national organization, accountability to the donors, that's clear. Whatever donor wants, that's what you get. But the sideways is much more interesting to explore because then we've learned different accountability from one community to another. We learn over a period of times because we want to be as flexible as possible while remain accountable according to, to the government, but also to the minimum level of the community. So we actually are exploring on ways with them, with the grassroots communities, how can accountability, while it matters, but it's not overburden, not becoming overburden to them. The least we want to happen is that they spend a lot of time working on being accountable rather than doing things or works that needs to be done for the community, right? So I guess that's where we draw the line. So we remain flexible, whether they have legality or not, it doesn't really matter. And that's what flexible fund is very important for us. And that's why public funding or donor funding and that is flexible is important. And we continue to do so.
Yeah. And one tiny thing to add to what Sita is saying in response to this question is sometimes understanding what the resistance is a very smart way of figuring out the engagement strategy. So because I know the Nigerian government is very good in policies, just like the Kenyan government. I think we have the most robust policies on paper, but practically, whether it's at the federal level government or at the sub-level governments, on the ground, they will say that there are no resources. So, but what I have found working for some movements, I've worked with movements in healthcare, advocating for specific implementation of, let's say, attention to specific disease areas. And you will see that while that policy is on paper, the reason why it's not implemented gives you an insight as to what's the issue. Sometimes the issue is resources. Sometimes the hindrance is just the fear of the change, because it's going to affect specific individuals and the power that they hold. So understanding that context also becomes very helpful in how the movement shapes its agenda.
Yeah, no, certainly. Look, I think one thing that we're discovering, South Africa's, perhaps because of a constitutional framing, is a little bit less precarious than many other countries in the world, certainly in the region. Mozambique just went through a massive upheaval. Swaziland is still a monarchy, absolute monarchy. And so there's the consequences of demanding accountability are very real, even in South Africa, mind you.
Yeah.
And so I think what we have, my response to a question like that would be, if you strengthen, and I must remember the word, the rootedness. We were playing a game. There's a biological word for the interconnectedness of trees, because that's how you stop one tree from falling, is that you connect them up with other trees, right? And so if you enter into struggle, you know that there's going to be sometimes consequences. And how do we support, firstly, the resilience of communities to resist, but secondly, to open ourselves up to resourcing actions that might not always be the things we are comfortable with as middle-class funders living in the cities.
Yeah.
We've run out of time. We've got a couple of minutes left, 2 minutes left, in fact. If there's one thing that I take very seriously, and that's a brief about time, and I'm scared of Safia, so let me stick to the original time that we had put. I want to ask you, what's your last question that you want to leave the group with? I think that there's so much we can talk about and go deeper in. And I'd phrase the question to you. What final message would you have for those who are genuinely interested in finding more effective ways to advance social justice and solidarity? Just, Steve, you want to kick us off? Just what's your final word?
Final word is, who suffers the most if you close shop? So if you decided not to advance the change that you are advancing now, and you get a job in a big corporation in the city, chances are that your wallet is going to look bigger and probably you have a better life for yourself. Who suffers the most? I keep asking myself this, and I keep asking the organizations we support. Like, if you decided to close shop, if someone paid you enough money to just close, stop, don't do what you keep pushing for, who suffers the most? And this question helps us always come back to the true north of why do we exist, or how much pressure can we withstand before we can actually bend? I think that is
Thanks,
going to be
Steve.
my lasting point, my
Thanks very
foundation.
much. Thanks very much. Sita, do you want to
Yes.
give your last thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Ashley. So I'd like to share what we've learned. We planted Akardea, or transformative resourcing, in 2024. So it is still young. It is emergent for us. It's still imperfect, far from it, and it carries a different DNA. That's what we feel. It reminds us that civil society is not always loud. Sometimes it is slow. Sometimes it is relational. Sometimes it's underground, just like roots are. Autonomy is not isolation, or what we've learned, that it is rooted interdependence. And perhaps the innovation our sector needs right now is not to grow bigger, as it is usually are, but to grow deeper, looking into the community, just like Steve mentioned earlier about how they found out the roots of resources, volunteers, network, knowledge, things like that. And And it needs to go deeper because when roots are strong, movement do not merely survive storms. Yeah, they regenerate, and that is what we need to see more and more emergent way, so that the civil society movement can still continue to give impact to the community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, both. My last thoughts, and I'm going to unashamedly steal a concept, an idea, a statement from my colleague who writes a critical reflection in our next forthcoming newsletter, which you must subscribe to. And in it, she's talking about political agency, and it's relevant to this conversation we've been having because it's about accountability, it's about power, it's about agency of communities who resist. And too often, very often, our vision of resistance is the Gen Z protests. It's the out there, it's the physical manifestation of revolutionary fervor. And she quotes, and she says, but there's something quite significant that we forget often. And she quotes a person called Zora Neale Hurston, who says that it's about something more interior, more rooted, something that is more concerned with the fullness of self that must exist before outward struggle can be sustained. The personal is political. If we don't invest in those rooted relationships that we're all talking about and building that interconnectivity that nurtures us and nurtures ourselves, I think we'll be those potted plants and we'll fall over at the first headwinds we encounter. Thank you both. It's really nice to see you online. I don't know when Civicus will bring us together again to talk more, but thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's been on the call. Thank you, Safia, for enabling this conversation. I'm done.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Safia, Steve, Ash.